With me now is the independent housing expert Henry Pryor. The Chancellor clearly says this is because it's been such a success. A lot of people looking at the housing market think it's really overheating and there's a fear of a bubble.
Well, there is concern as to whether they've overdone it, and with all the government initiatives that we've seen, Help to Buy, as well as others that have come along to try and underpin the housing market does seem in pretty robust form across much of the country. But actually, coincidentally today, the Land Registry have published their figures, and whilst they show an uptick in the volume of houses that have been sold, up about 15% year on year, house prices, if you move away from London and the South East, are actually falling slightly behind if you factor in inflation.
Now, is the implication of this perhaps Help to Buy should be looked at again? I mean, if there is a worry about the housing market itself, then perhaps no stimulus is needed at all from the government.
Well, I think that the Chancellor and the coalition government can take some credit for having at least got the mortgage industry busy and lending, which is something that 12 months ago a lot of people were calling for. I think that clearly the Bank of England are going to keep something of a watching brief on what is happening to the housing market and house prices in particular. And we may well see Help to Buy 2, which was the element of Help to Buy that was brought in ahead of schedule just last month. That may be scaled back, and the ceiling, which at present is £600,000, which many people feel is perhaps a little toppy, is almost inevitably, I think, going to be pulled back either now in the Chancellor's autumn statement next week or at the beginning of next year.
Do you worry that in a way, this is part of what got us into this mess in the first place? In other words, households borrowed a lot of money, which they couldn't in the end repay. Happened in the United States, happened here, and it caused real problems. That we could be going that way again.
Well, inevitably, the actions of the government are open to that very charge. Should we be looking at helping people to afford to pay the very high house prices that we have across the United Kingdom, or should we allow house prices to fall back to more traditional and perhaps some would say more sensible norms? Now, that's the dilemma. The coalition government seemed intent on ramping house prices over the next 525 days at least.
You mean until the next election?
Until the next election. And at that point, we'll see whether the governor is able to be brave enough in order to do something to haul back Help to Buy. But at some stage, it's going to have to be withdrawn, and the fuel will be taken out of the housing market. And what will happen to prices then? And more importantly, what will have happened to people who've bought in the interim? And
being that this is now where we are, what are the implications? I mean, presumably interest rates could go up slightly earlier than we thought, particularly to choke off any kind of housing bubble. That could be one thing, which could be good news for savers. Well,
I think that's the most exciting thing about this. The tapering of funding for lending ought to see a result from banks and lenders in general of better times for savers who've been frankly crucified over the last 5 or 6 years, certainly since the downturn in 2007 and 2008. If savers could be recompensed and become once again the source of funding for majority of high street lenders, that in turn would perhaps excuse them if and when they decide they're going to put up interest rates. There's going to be a lot of change over the next 18 months, and it seems that the housing market looks set fair for at least the short term, but longer term there are still some big question marks.
Henry, thanks very much.